Welcome to our third video in the parent series, Understanding Learning Difficulties. I'm Jenny Tebbit, and today we're going to be talking about ADHD. In New Zealand, around 2.5% of children are diagnosed with ADHD. Internationally, that figure is as high as 7.5%. I don't believe that we have less ADHD in New Zealand, rather that we are better at diagnosing a certain type of ADHD well. But there are actually three types of ADHD. The first of these is ADHD hyperactive. These students are actually quite easy to spot. They're always on the go, they can't sit still, and they often are very impulsive and have difficulty focusing. I often say that these are the go, 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 crash kind of kids. However, sometimes with ADHD, they seem to need less sleep, and then they can also have trouble sleeping. A much harder type to identify is the ADHD predominantly inattentive type. These students are often the dreamy kids. They don't misbehave and they just underachieve really quietly. One of the reasons that these children are hard to identify is that you often can't tell whether a student is focused or not just by looking at them. They can be away with their own thoughts. The third type of ADHD is actually the mixed type, and these often get missed by school and by home. Some days these children are more hyperactive, other days they're more inattentive. It is quite common that these students are seen as the children with a behaviour problem. We are often taught that if a child can behave one day but not behave the next, then that's a behaviour problem. It's something intentional. Because the child can behave one day, they should be able to behave. So it's a choice. In the case of ADHD, it is also understood that ADHD is a chemical imbalance in the brain, and that some days chemicals are more imbalanced than others, resulting in the behaviour and the attentional variations. And this is not commonly recognised, and these children are often labelled as the naughty children. A common misconception about ADHD is that concentration must always be a problem. And if children can concentrate on some tasks, then they mustn't have ADHD. For example, commonly children can play Lego, they can play Minecraft, or they can do computer games for hours. When the brain is interested, their neurons are firing and they're interested and focused. When they're not interested, the neurons stop firing and they can't stay on task. An important fact to be aware of is that 50% of children with a learning difficulty will also have ADHD, and this always compounds the difficulties. In my experience, if we don't diagnose both learning differences, we get reduced achievement and poorer outcomes for our children. It's not always easy to spot the inattentive type ADHD. I'm a specialist tutor, and I can sometimes tutor children for a whole term, and then I think we're not making the progress with this child that I expected, and I start to suspect inattentive type ADHD. Now, I work with these children all the time, rather than different types of learners, and I find it difficult to identify. So we can imagine how hard it is for parents and also how hard it is for teachers. Sometimes our children have other co-occurring differences as well. Being on the spectrum, having learning differences, and ADHD quite commonly occur all together. Join us next week when we will discuss the autistic spectrum. Raising Achievement is committed to making the difference for those who learn differently. See you next week.